Hey, this is Gina Grad.
Hi, this is Teresa Strasser.
Hi, everyone. This is Mike Errico.
Hey there. This is Casey Cavalier.
I'm Rocky Rose.
And you are listening to The Jay Franze Show.
Lucky you.
Welcome to The Jay Franze Show. A behind-the-curtain look at the entertainment industry with insights you can't pay for and stories you've never heard. Now, here's your host, Jay Franze.
Well, thank you for joining me and welcome to the show. I am Jay Franze, and this is your backstage pass to the entertainment industry. This week, we get to talk with a merchandise and a VIP manager. We get to talk with Kelly Murray. We'll talk to her about what it's like being on the road with Jason Bonham, her time with Live Nation, and her role as a VIP manager. Now, Kelly, she just got off the road with Jason Bonham. She just moved to California and is kind enough to join us here tonight. So, if you'd like to join in, comment, or fire off any questions, please head over to jayfranze.com. Now let's get started. Kelly, my friend, how are you?
Hi, I am doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
This is my pleasure, my friend. I've been looking forward to this. I can't wait to jump in tonight. But before we do, just tell us what this new move to California is like for you.
Oh, goodness. So, honestly, it's been sort of a growing manifestation on my mind probably this year since around like June or July. And thought about it off and on. And then around November is when I kind of made the final decision to be like, okay, my previous lease in Atlanta is up in mid-December. And I thought, okay, do I stay and see how things continue to go, or do I make a leap? And I just said, you know what, why not? It happened very, very fast once everything sort of fell into place. And I moved here entirely within a couple weeks.
Wow.
And also dealing with it while I was on the road recently with Jason Bonham and his crew.
That is insane to me that you moved that quick. Did you find a place during that time too, or did you have a place picked out already?
My lovely dad, who ended up helping me out a little bit, he looked up a few like realtors.
Nice.
And my dad laughed at me. And right when I came into the bedroom in this one, and there was like all the like staged furniture set up, and I just kind of looked around and I pictured myself living in here, and I just like ended up sitting on the bed and just kind of like taking it in. I'm like, yep, this is the one.
That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's just go ahead and jump right in. I know you just got off the road with Jason Bonham. What was that like?
Well, it was funny because so the tour started, I believe, on November 8th or 9th while I was here. And everything was like planned ahead, but the Atlanta date was on November 17th. And that's when I jumped on. That was my first day. But first day was a little rough for me, I will admit, because for those that don't know the merch world very well, there's a thing called venue sales versus artist sales. And venue sales is when typically like all these like either small or large merchandising teams through the venues handle and sell and count all the merch, pack it up. And then artist sales is when there's a rep on the road, which is what I typically do. I'm doing everything, selling, doing the settlements, packing up, and so on and so forth. And just thinking back to that day, I just like remember jumping in and I was just like, oh my goodness, just trying to catch up with everything and meet new people. And I just remember it was a very high anxiety sort of day, just trying to play catch up. But then after like day 2, 3, 4, like as time went on, it got a lot better and smoother. But everyone was very welcoming and supportive, chill, open. It honestly felt like I was on tour with just it just felt like I was on tour with a whole bunch of like stepdads or stepuncles. Just, just, and typically I was just like, okay, a tour like this, because it was 2 buses and a semi. And I thought, okay, long days, I'm going to go to bed early. That went out the window right away. Every night I was up until pretty late, just chilling in the front lounge or watching movies, talking, getting to know each other. I ended up meeting his son and his son's band too. I was kind of bummed out because I was only working with them for 2 days, both in Atlanta and then in North Carolina. It was at some big casino. And they were all like very fun guys around my age.
This is his son's band.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jagger Henry, which they're all local here. So on day 2, I was like, oh, they're actually really fun. But anyway, first time I met Jason, I was just kind of, I can't remember which city we were in. After a while, it's just a whole blur. It's just like, wait, what city am I in again? But I was just sitting backstage by myself, working on my computer, and I just sensed someone come up to me, and I hear this English accent. We chatted for about 10, 15 minutes, and he just came off as just like a very, not only a super talented musician, but just a very sweet and genuine, caring person. Very much a dad too. He talked about his kids a lot.
He's now a grandfather.
Yes, he became a grandfather on the tour. He was like super ecstatic about it. There was a day where he flew home to meet his new grandkid, which is sweet. And he was giving us all updates. So that was really cool.
That's got to be pretty cool for him to just take off and come right back like that. So were you nervous when you got the call that you're going on the road with them?
I was excited, but for me, deep down, I was a little wary because, I don't know, for me, starting some new gig sounds great. Just naturally a little wary, a little nervous, like, okay, just with the new stuff in general, which is normal.
When you take on a role like that, each camp is different. They run things differently, but ultimately business is business. So when you take on a role like that, do you feel like there's any hurdles or anything that you have to overcome when joining a new team?
Yes. It's also a big process of learning as you go.
So you'd have to learn fast.
Learn fast. You think quick on your feet. But yeah, just deep down, I was like super wary. I had just had this feeling. I'm like, I don't know, I'm looking forward to it, but also just naturally don't know what to expect. But then as time went on, like, the first like week in tour, I started to feel pretty comfortable and getting to know, I guess, the fan base and the types of crowds that come through. It's just the little things that you start to pick up on.
Give me an example.
It was just interesting talking with a couple of fans. Sometimes they talk about like, oh, I saw Led Zeppelin, back in the day. And, just to hear those stories, it's just kind of painting a picture for me.
It's got to be pretty cool learning about the history like that, especially playing the Zeppelin catalog, being related to Zeppelin and having all those connections. It could not be a better show to go see. It's definitely an experience. So do you have any memorable moments from the tour?
What stuck out to me is just some of the stories that Jason would tell in between songs, just stories about his dad and growing up and meeting Sting and like playing drums when he was young. Just hearing all those types of stories, it just kind of like made me stop and think and go, wow, like this is just,
it's huge.
Yeah, it's huge. And there are a couple of like funny like moments that I think back and laugh and remember that were like non-show related, really. But if you want to hear one,
Oh,
I
yeah,
can.
absolutely. Let's go.
So we had a date in Canada, in Niagara Falls.
Oh, yeah. Toronto area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really cool. I ended up having enough time to like go down and like take some videos of Niagara Falls.
You didn't go over with a barrel?
No. Kind of like a Looney Tunes cartoon moment.
Yep.
But yeah, just the touring, everything aside, like, you know, if you have extra time to like take a moment to like go out and like experience certain parts of a city or a town that you've never been to, those are kind of the moments that like stick with you, where you're just like, oh wow, like I get to see the world and places that you've only like saw on TV or in film.
So what did you do in Toronto?
So we had enough time to go down and actually like get as close as I could to Niagara Falls. And it was at night, and a couple of the venue staff told me like, oh, go see it at night. Like it's all lit up and colors change. And I just remember going there, and I just stood there, and it was almost like an ethereal experience. It was just so like breathtaking. And the staff told me it was that the waterfall was flowing at like 30%. He's like, you think that's breathtaking? It's only at 30%.
Right.
It's not at 100%. So, but it was still so gorgeous. And I just remember standing there and just taking a moment and being like, eh.
Oh, it's an amazing place. I've been there a couple times, and the falls are beautiful. I mean, I get drenched every time I go, but they're beautiful. Go up there and watch them, and I've yet to see anybody go down in a barrel, so I haven't had the experience yet. But I've seen the falls, and Toronto is a beautiful city too. I mean, and being on the U.S. side overlooking Toronto is beautiful. I mean, you get to see the cityscape and all the lights, and it's a really nice place.
Yes. Really go out much in Toronto, but I mean, whenever I like go through like a city multiple times, there's always like that go-to spot,
Right.
or like go-to coffee shop or restaurant. And
Well, on that note, what do you like to go do?
oh goodness, it really depends. Like Toronto or Canada, I always have to go to a Tim Hortons, always.
I can't say that. I'm a Dunkin' person, but go ahead.
Like a true East Coaster.
Yep. I am a Bostonian through and through. What about restaurants? You try to hit any restaurants when you go to town, some local stuff?
For Atlanta, since I've lived there, one of my go-tos is it's a place called Slutty Vegan. It's actually a vegetarian vegan place, but their burgers are awesome, like to the point where it's kind of hard to tell. But for those types of burgers, like you don't really need like condiments or anything on them. They're that great. Minneapolis, where I'm originally from, born and raised.
Nice.
There is a place called, I'm going to say a lot of vegetarian vegan places because that's kind of my preference.
Your thing?
Mm-hmm. It's called the Herbivore's Butcher. It's been around for a while. I think there's only one location in Minnesota, but they ship nationally. But they're spot on too.
Now let me ask you a question, since you're vegan, vegetarian.
Mm-hmm.
When the band hits a city and they want to go out, you go out with them?
Typically, yes, but depending on the area, yes, it is a little challenging at times because your options are limited. Or if you're like, just perfect example, just on this Bonham tour, it was me and our guitar tech Rob were both vegan and everyone else was carnivores. So it is a little challenging when everyone wants one thing and then you're just like, oh, well, there's really not that many options for us, or just one, like a salad or something.
Right. Well, I'm just thinking, if you're trying to spend time with the band and you're bonding and spending those moments together, I mean, that's what it's all about. Being on the road is just hanging out together. Mm-hmm. And they want to hit up a traditional burger place, and you're kind of thinking, I'll have the lettuce and tomato and skip the burger.
Yeah.
It just might be a little challenging from time to time.
or steakhouse, barbecue, just sort of that like after show food that's comfort food.
All right. Well, let's talk about your typical day. What is a day like for you?
Let's see. Off the road, I'm also with Live Nation. And typically for that, I do more, I kind of like, for that, I tend to step away from the merch world and tend to do more like production assisting or production running. Currently, we're kind of in a slow season just due to the holidays and New Year. But
which is good for us because that's why you're here tonight.
Yes. For days like that, I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. They're typically like 12-hour plus days. Get to the venue early. You meet up with managers and production managers or the TMs or assistant tour managers with the tour. And tasks get broken up. Like, okay, one person goes do this at this time. Typically stuff is scheduled out throughout the day for us to do. And sometimes things come up last minute, which does happen. It's just typically like a little bit of like groundwork here and there. Yeah, typically you're just like shopping like a rider. For those that don't know what a rider is, it's basically just like a grocery list of like stuff that they need for like hospitality or their dressing room. And usually you do that task first and then you move on to the next. Anything can come up really, from like hotel runs to airport runs.
So you're really doing everything.
Yeah, a little bit of everything. You're poor comparison, but it's kind of like an IKEA project. Like you're kind of like that extra little screw that tends to like try to hold everything in. And really it does make a difference.
Oh, absolutely. What's the craziest thing you've ever seen on a rider?
Ooh. Good question. I forgot who the band was, but there was one where it was like all broken up, and then at the bottom it said miscellaneous, and it said a ghillie suit. And at the time, I had no idea what a ghillie suit was, so I ended up having to look it up, and I was just like, oh. And I remember asking the tour manager, I'm like, do you, like, and I thought they were serious. I'm like, do you really need this? Like, is it for the show or one of the members to wear on stage? And he's just like,
they're
no,
just
just
busting your cookies.
Yep. I think it was they're not from the US, they're from Europe. It's this black metal band or death metal band. They're called Watain. And they've like actually requested like real blood, which I know sounds disgusting.
Everybody needs it.
No, it was more so for like stage performance and just their whole aura or style. And I'm like, ugh. But I've also seen like another band. They don't use real blood, thank goodness, but they use like it's a band called Gore.
Yeah.
Just crazy.
Theatrical.
Mm-hmm. They use like fake slime and fake blood, and like I just remember like 2 days before their show, like the rest of the staff would actually have to cover like all of our PAs and speakers, and down on the floor by the barricade they covered these huge plastic tarps.
Right.
Just it had to take a couple days in advance to cover everything.
These are things you're doing from the production side. So you are unique because you've seen it from both angles. Mm-hmm. So on the production side, you're running the show. You're basically the conduit between the venue and the artist. So what's it like when you're on the other side? Which one do you like better?
If I had to pick one, I would pick the tour side. It's a little more structured. You're part of an established group. Yeah, tour side, you get to kind of see how everything kind of comes together.
Right.
And just knowing that you play a part of that.
So you just got off the road with Jason Bonham. Mm-hmm. So what's a day in life on that tour like?
So typically get to the venues anytime between like 7, 8, 9 in the morning, wake up, gather my things, get off the bus. Usually I try to get up a little earlier just to have like an hour to myself and get ready, go backstage. Usually if I'm able to, on my end, before we load everything in off the truck, usually I'd go check out backstage, see where catering is, if we had catering.
Do you typically get more than one meal when you're on the road?
Oh, yes.
I know the venue provides at least dinner, but do you get lunch and breakfast as well?
Breakfast was usually not offered. It was either like a cold breakfast or like a tea or coffee station. Right. Usually for breakfast was kind of like
grab an apple.
Yeah, grab an apple, banana, something quick, because our load-ins weren't until like 11 or noon. But usually lunch and dinner was provided. And when I would have time, aside from like gathering my things, getting all like settled for the day, I would actually go ahead of time and like check out the merch area just to kind of scope it out for size, spacing, just to determine like, okay, how much do I need to take in today? So I typically like to go in and like scope out the area before things tend to get a little bit busy, just to kind of prep on my end and just to kind of go through a mental checklist. Like, okay, here's what it looks like. Okay, here's the entry point, exit, just to kind of plan ahead for that.
When you're in some of these venues, do you have multiple stations?
This was like a casino and theater run. And usually for theaters or clubs, there's usually one designated area space. If I were to do like larger tours, like arenas or stadiums, there's multiple merch stands. But yeah, for this one, there was usually like one merch area. Also, this tour was unique too. I mean, usually there's a support band or like one or two openers. And usually you have to share space with them, or they're like in a slightly separate area off to the side of you.
Is there a challenge when doing that?
There's one time where I totally set up everything, display, counted in everything, got all prepped, and I was like, okay, I have a half hour until doors, and then all of a sudden support too. And then there was one time where someone from the venue was like, hey, you have to move your stuff. And I was like, couldn't have told me this earlier while you saw me putting things up on a grid. But sometimes it does get a little tight, which is expected. But for this one, I mean, it was a breeze. Again, there was only 2 days where his son's band was on and sharing space. And for this one, it was unique because it was like just headliner and kind of got your own space. So overall, looking back, I was like, I kind of got spoiled with it a little bit. But usually with support, you just try to make it work as best you can.
Well, normally when you have support too, they don't have the same setup that you would have. Mm-hmm. They might have a couple T-shirts or something where you might have a full-blown display. I'm sure that kind of helps a little bit, but I can only imagine the challenges you might have in people trying to, step over each other and finding a location within the venue that's not only suitable for you, but suitable for the line of people that's going to be lining up. I mean, it can get hectic. Speaking of that, I mean, what kind of challenges like that do you have, or do you have any favorite venues?
Ooh. As for challenges, usually and this is like, as I'm setting up, I'll usually like circle back with the TM and just be like, hey, is tonight sold out? If it's a sold out show, usually it's just like, okay, like there's going to be, X amount extra bodies in the room, which is a good thing. So you expect to be a little bit busier. There was one show where we were in DC at the Warner Theater, which is a gorgeous theater, by the way. Walking through the lobby, it kind of felt like you were in the lobby of like the Titanic or something, just super ornate. But anyway, I remember that show. I was kind of like taken aback. I was like, oh, I'm actually like super busy. I mean, it's a good thing, but there's certain cities where it's like, okay, sold out show, okay, but then like once doors open, you're just like, oh, like didn't expect the city to be a very merch heavy crowd. But as for favorite venues on the Bonham run, I think it was the State Theater, if I'm not mistaken, Port Chester, New York. Some of these theaters are built in like the mid 1920s or late 1920s.
They're
and
beautiful.
Absolutely. And I still have a picture of it, but it's this like, I mean, it looks like the mural was done like a week ago or recently, but it was this State Theater. It's this big, huge mural, and it's very Indian influenced and just with a lot of colors and detail, like nothing you'd see really today. But as far as other favorite venues, some of the House of Blues venues I like. Yeah, House of Blues, Boston.
Boss, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Now we can talk. see, now we can be friends.
Yeah, House of Blues Boston is super cool, and usually all the House of Blues venues are just super like unique and like every floor just has a whole like mishmash of different artwork.
That's awesome. I saw you in Cincinnati, and you go from Boston and these venues that are very old to Cincinnati, which is brand new. Did you like being in that venue? Was that a nice venue for you?
I did, actually. Catering was great. Back, I could just tell, like, it was just, it's almost like when, like, cars or apartments that just have that new, like,
That
you could just
new
tell.
venue smell?
Yep. Great venue, good acoustics.
And they did have great food.
Oh my goodness. Yes, triggering my memory now. The catering, I can't remember if they were in-house or contracted, but the catering for that night was stellar.
I came home. I'm laughing only because I came home, and that was the first thing I told my wife was, "Oh, you should have seen the food. It was great. They had 50 pies." It was too funny.
Now I just remember, again, talking with our guitar tech, we are just like, "Oh, did you see that there's vegan cookies? Oh, how many did you have?" I'm just like, "Oh, I already had 4." Yeah, when there's a good variety with catering, it's just like, okay, you're on your shit, you know what's up.
Oh, yeah. No, and they were super friendly, too. I mean, it's crazy. I've been on the road several times. I've never had catering, and the people there just be so nice and so friendly. So it was good. Good venue, good catering. The venue itself was beautiful. I mean, it's brand new, so it's beautiful. It was nice. It seemed like there wasn't a bad seat in the house. It was good overall. I liked it. Do you have any funny stories?
Ooh. The first band that I ever did a tour with, they're called the Happy Fits. They're from New Jersey. Hi, Calvin, Luke. And there was like this poster, and obviously I could tell it wasn't like quote unquote official. It was just like a DIY printed image of like a still image of Brendan Fraser from one of his movies. And they had an employee somehow like mimic or forge Brendan's signature and say like, "Oh, to Luke and Ross, good luck with the show," like pretending it's actually signed by Brendan Fraser.
That's awesome. Who else have you gone out with?
I have also gone out with a duo band from Nashville called Icon for Hire, and then he's from New York or Brooklyn. He goes by the name of Hoodie Allen. I did his tour for the last 2 weeks.
How do you get picked up at that point of a tour?
At the time, I knew Hoodie's TM, Avery.
Yeah.
Hi, Avery. I knew her, and she just randomly called me up, and she just said, "Hey, what's your availability?" And I told her, and I just said, "Well, I have another tour starting on September 6th at the time." And she's like, "Oh, my current merch person has a conflict." And she's like, "Can you come in and fill in?" And I said, "Okay, yeah, sure." Did that. That tour was a little rough because we had a bus that misbehaved quite a bit. It broke down like 3 times. Oh. We had to get a U-Haul. I just remember that.
Nothing fun about that.
No, I just remember that tour was super chaotic, but we just powered through. And then right after that, I did Apocalyptica.
Oh, yeah.
They're actually really unique. They're like, think of like a metal band, but with all cellos. And they're from Finland.
Which is awesome, by the way. I love things like that. I love metal music, and I love when people put a twist on it. It's very cool. We're talking about merch here, and I think when people go to a show and they see a merch table, they don't really think much of it. They just think of a table they can go buy a T-shirt or something. But there's so much more to it, and there's so much that's involved. And you're actually very well educated. Can you tell us how that plays into what you're doing now?
I feel like I'm one of the rare few, I guess it depends. Most of the people that I've met either didn't go to college for whatever reason or went to college for a short amount of time, like a semester or two, and then dropped out, or just didn't go overall. But I actually do have one degree, which is in PR, but I did study music business for my first year. But yes, how that plays in, it does, because with the music business one, it really helped because there was a class that I took my freshman year, and I actually, to this day, I still have the notes with me. It just goes through every single part of the music business, from how management works, how I learned how typically most like booking agents and agencies work. And
how close was that education to the actual real world?
Ooh.
Well, the reason I ask is I used to teach at the engineering school in Nashville.
Okay.
And I would teach audio engineering for both studio work as well as live sound. But my focus was on studio work, and I worked with the publishing companies and the record labels. Mm-hmm. But I also worked with those publishing companies and record labels outside of the school. So I would actually mix records for them and do things like that. And the education in the school was not always on par with what they were actually doing in the field. So I was just curious if it was the same way for you.
A little bit, but most of my knowledge and just what I've learned so far has been just through doing
it on the road.
Mm-hmm.
Which is cool. I mean, like I said earlier, you got to think on your feet and be able to adapt and move quickly. And that's what it was like working in the studios. I mention all the time that we spend other people's money. So when you're spending other people's money, you have to move quick. You have to be a quick problem solver and be able to do all those things. So you being able to learn that on the fly is amazing to me.
Yeah, and just taking whatever you can, and also working shows or taking on roles that typically not a whole lot of people want to do. And it just also acquiring like certain like mentors or bosses that are also willing to like take the extra time to sort of like mentor you has helped a lot.
So on that thought, what are some more traits or characteristics that you think make a good tour manager, a merchandise manager, a VIP manager?
Definitely communication is huge. Also patience sounds cliche, but yes, patience is a virtue. Or if something goes wrong during the show, like if you find out, oh, hey, there's a noise curfew, you got to be, done and start packing up the stage by 11 or midnight. That can usually be a little bit of a challenge because it can feel rushed. But yes, communicate. What I've noticed, especially with tour managers, is usually like an open door policy for everybody.
You mentioned the curfew. I remember being at the outdoor venue just outside of Boston, and they had a 10 p.m. curfew. So you could still load out and do everything, but the music had to stop because it was an outdoor venue and it was practically in a neighborhood. So I thought that was insane.
That is one of the earliest curfews I've ever heard of, is 10 p.m. Yep. I think it wasn't 10, it was more like 10:30 or 11, but there's an amphitheater in the Atlanta area. It's called Chastain. I remember working a show there, and it was for ZZ Top, and they had a super early curfew. Another thing too with just shows and touring, whatever in general, is if you play outdoor venues, you have the chance of like natural disasters or storms that you got to be wary of, typically with like thunderstorm and lightning.
Well, what do you do in that circumstance when it starts pouring down rain and the merch is just getting drenched. What do you do?
Because cardboard boxes and water don't mix.
No.
It's recommended that you have at least like a few like plastic tubs or.
But do you ever have to pack up early? I mean, that's going to be frowned upon. I mean, does it ever happen?
Oh my goodness. I just went through, not on tour, but it was while I was working a festival. I don't know if I want to name the festival because I'm sure if I were to start describing it, people would just start to be like, oh yeah,
I was
one.
there. Yeah.
Usually like has an awning or a tent. Usually you're somewhat good, but if it's like, no, there's lightning, like this isn't going away or this isn't subsiding anytime soon, you gotta go. But yes, this is in early September. I'll just say this took place in a rural area in Virginia, and it was just me like thinking about it and describing it. The festival hasn't been around for a long time, but I just remember it like me and coworkers getting there. It was on like day 2. There was like tornado warnings or just high wind warnings, and it's just burned into my mind, and I just kind of get like show PTSD thinking of it. Yeah, it started like raining like sideways, winds picked up. We heard so many stories of, campsites being destroyed. And I just remember like me and coworkers, we would like take the tents and just literally, we would have to hold them shut for dear life. And parts of like the big stages got damaged. Yeah, it was
rough.
Yeah, no pun intended. It was a bad whirlwind of events.
Joe Kaiser was recently on the show, and he was on tour with Nickelback. He was front of house.
Oh, nice.
So we went there, and it was at the outdoor venue here in Cincinnati, and there was nothing covering merch. Now, luckily, no rain or no issues that night, but there was nothing covering them at all. I mean, they just had a table just sprawled out of just shirts and sweatshirts and jackets, everything you can imagine they had. And all I can think of myself is if it rained, they'd be screwed.
Yeah.
So, what's next for you?
Honestly, I wish I had a solid answer, but I don't right now. It is the holiday season, so things are slowing down.
Does that make you nervous?
Yes, a little bit, but after going through it the past couple of years, it's just like, okay, we're going through slow periods. But right now, as far as like touring, there is not confirmed yet. There is a possibility I might be out. Again, it's not confirmed, but there is a slight chance I might go out with Elvis Costello. Nice. Mid-January until earlier mid-February. As far as the rest of the year, if any new dates with Bonham and that camp come up, I'll, of course, do it again.
Would you like to do artist management?
I would. Yeah, something a little more, admin related, office related, but at the same time, still being very hands-on with putting shows together and with bands and artists, but also having the chance to still go be like, oh, okay, I'm going to go out to this festival and see, clients of X, Y, and Z.
Well, if you do artist management versus tour management, you get to do more of the negotiation, more of the business side, and you get to have more than one client. Mm-hmm. And you get to go out to the road, and you get to do a lot of the work you're doing now. You get to organize a lot of that stuff. It's the experience, and that's what you're going to build off of. That's what's going to make you desirable as a manager, is having that experience and knowing how to arrange a tour, knowing what venues can do what, and what the capabilities are, whether it be performance-wise or merch-wise, or just load in, load out, and what gear you can have and what you can't. So, I mean, there's a lot of things you're going to be picking up as time goes on.
Yeah, and just organizing, other small things like stops for like press or interviews. That's something I'd also like to get involved in somehow as well.
Well, I think, again, if you look back at artist management, that all ties together. That's like that all-encompassing position that you get to utilize all of your skills. I mean, everything from, arranging the tour, the venues, the merch, to the PR, to dealing with the record labels, to arranging recording studios. I mean, all of that stuff is all done by that position. Most people don't give it enough credit. Mm-hmm. So that person juggles a lot. So be interesting. I'll be, following you quite a bit to see how it goes. And when you make that change, you can come back on and tell us about it.
Yeah, for sure. For now, it's just a matter of time and just sort of like knocking on doors and also a little bit of waiting, but hopefully something works out.
Well, you're meeting all the right people at this point. So, I mean, you're doing some pretty big things. Mm-hmm. So we do this thing here we call Unsung Heroes, where we take a minute to shine the light on somebody behind the scenes, somebody that doesn't typically get credit, somebody that may have helped you get to where you are in your career. Is there anybody that you'd like to shine a little light on? Family member or somebody who may have supported you?
Oof.
No, I don't want to shed light on anybody.
No, I'm not just going to say no one.
Did this all by myself.
No, there are a couple people that come to mind. One that I just want to give a general shout out to. One of my ex-bosses, actually. There's a venue in Minneapolis I used to work at for a couple of years called the Armory. Nice
name for a venue.
Yes. It's like just over 7,000 cap. And I'd like to shout out my old boss, Nate, who he was just one of the most fun bosses that I've ever worked with. Like, it made me look forward to working shows. Another one that I want to give a shout out to, and just a huge thank you in general, is to Elena and Greg at the Masquerade for not only just giving me the chance, but just being very flexible and helpful. And another one with Live Nation that I want to give a shout out, and also a huge thank you to for connecting me with some contacts here with the corporate office is Ruthie. She's director of production for the Atlanta and Southeast markets. She's super cool too. She's like in her late 60s, early 70s. Hopefully I'm not wrong about that, but yeah, I kind of like had a casual conversation with her one night and just hearing about her experience, and I was just kind of like blown away by her path in general. And she's just like, no, I'm still kicking. I like to be busy and this and that. And I just thought, oh wow, I want to be at that point,
right,
when I'm older. And so yeah, I want to be like a Ruthie.
I want to be like a Ruthie.
Just sharp as a tack. And yes, another, just in general, I'll give a shout out to all the close friends that I made over the years, and also of course to my parents, Ron and Peggy, and my younger sister Caitlin.
Nice. Who
are a solid foundation and are just there on the good and the bad days, no matter what, even though we're so far apart.
A big thanks to Kelly for taking the time to share her stories with us, and thank you for taking the time to hang with me here. I really do appreciate it. If you could, please follow, share, and connect on all the socials. You can do that and find the links to everything mentioned over at jayfranze.com/episode 44. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to The Jay Franze Show. Make sure you visit us at jayfranze.com. Follow, connect, and say hello. This episode has been brought to you by VR Knives, your source for 100% custom knives made by a true rock star. So, if you're in the market for a new piece of art, reach out to VR Knives. 407-421-5528. 407-421-5528.